He trembled as he held the weapon, the assembled crowd of young soldiers watching with barely concealed amusement. They snickered behind his back, whispering that he could barely hold the rifle steady, let alone demonstrate anything useful about weapons maintenance. The training sergeant had reluctantly invited him to participate in the demonstration more out of politeness than expectation that he could contribute anything meaningful. But then something changed in the old man's demeanor as he closed his eyes and let muscle memory take control. His fingers began to move like poetry across the weapon's surface, finding every bolt, every spring, every component with the precision of someone who had performed this task thousands of times before. Click slide released. The sounds of disassembly echoed through the silent training bay as parts separated and fell into perfect order on the table before him. Blindfolded, he stripped the rifle faster than anyone watching had ever seen it done, transforming from a trembling elderly man into a master craftsman whose hands remembered skills that time couldn't erase. The silence that followed was thick with astonishment and shame as young soldiers realized they had been witnessing something extraordinary. This wasn't just routine weapons maintenance being performed by an elderly volunteer. This was a demonstration of expertise that exceeded anything they had learned in their military training. The same hands they had mocked for shaking had just displayed a level of proficiency that spoke to decades of experience with weapons systems that predated anything currently in military service. But the old man just opened his eyes, smiled quietly, and began reassembling the weapon with the same fluid precision he had shown during disassembly. He didn't need their amazement or their sudden respect because he had never been performing for their approval. He had been sharing knowledge and skills that he hoped would keep young soldiers alive in situations where equipment failure could mean the difference between mission success and catastrophic loss of life. Welcome to Silent Salute. Before we continue this remarkable story, tell us in the comments from which city in the world are you watching this video today? And if you think stories like this need to be heard, hit that subscribe button to support the channel. We're growing every day, and I sincerely thank you for being a part of it. Fort Stewart stretched across the Georgia landscape like a vast training complex where soldiers from the 3rd Infantry Division prepared for deployments to some of the world's most challenging environments. The base served as home to multiple units, including mechanized infantry battalions, armor companies, and support elements that required constant training on weapons systems that ranged from individual rifles to complex vehicle-mounted weapons platforms. Within this extensive training environment, the weapons maintenance facility served as a critical hub where soldiers learned to care for the equipment that would keep them alive in combat zones around the world. The facility housed multiple training bays equipped with tables, tools, and examples of every weapon system currently used by the military, along with detailed technical manuals and instructional materials. On this particular morning, the facility was hosting a special training session for newly arrived soldiers who needed comprehensive instruction on weapons maintenance procedures before they could be certified for deployment readiness. The session was being conducted by Sergeant First Class Rebecca Martinez, a veteran instructor whose expertise with weapons systems had earned her recognition as one of the best technical trainers in the division. Among the participants in the training session was an elderly man named William Harper, who had volunteered to assist with the program through a veteran mentorship initiative that connected retired military personnel with active duty units. At 78 years old, William appeared somewhat out of place among the young soldiers who comprised most of the training group, his movements slower and less certain than the energetic recruits around him. William had been participating in the mentorship program for several months, helping with various training activities and sharing his perspective on military service with soldiers who were just beginning their own careers. His contributions had been welcomed by training staff who appreciated having an experienced veteran available to provide historical context and personal insights about military life and service. But William's participation in the weapons maintenance session had been met with skepticism from some of the younger soldiers who questioned whether someone his age could contribute meaningfully to training on modern weapons systems. They had observed his slightly trembling hands and cautious movements, wondering whether he would be able to handle weapons safely or demonstrate procedures effectively. The skepticism wasn't malicious, but it reflected generational assumptions about aging and capability that often created barriers between older veterans and younger service members. The recruits had grown up with advanced technology and sophisticated weapons systems that seemed far removed from the equipment that previous generations of soldiers had used during their own military service. What the young soldiers didn't understand was that William Harper's relationship with weapons systems extended far beyond casual familiarity or basic training from decades past. His trembling hands and careful movements masked a lifetime of expertise with firearms that had been developed during some of the most intensive combat operations of the Vietnam War, where weapons reliability often meant the difference between survival and death. William had enlisted in the Army in 1966 at the age of 18 and had served 2 tours in Vietnam as an infantry soldier and later as a weapons specialist responsible for maintaining and repairing small arms for an entire battalion. His duties had included not only routine maintenance, but also field repairs under combat conditions where speed and accuracy were essential for keeping soldiers equipped and ready for action. During his military service, William had worked with every type of small arms weapon used by American forces, including rifles, pistols, machine guns, and grenade launchers. His expertise had extended beyond basic maintenance to include modification and customization of weapons for specific mission requirements, along with training other soldiers in advanced maintenance techniques that weren't covered in standard military manuals. The skills William had developed during his military service had been honed through years of practical application under conditions that demanded perfection. In combat zones, weapons failures weren't just inconveniences, they were potentially fatal problems that required immediate solutions using whatever tools and materials were available in field conditions. After completing his military service, William had continued working with firearms as a civilian gunsmith and instructor, building a career that had spanned over 40 years and had included work with law enforcement agencies, military contractors, and civilian shooting organizations. His reputation for expertise and reliability had made him a sought-after consultant for weapons modifications and specialized training programs. But William had never advertised his extensive background when volunteering for the mentorship program, preferring to let his contributions speak for themselves rather than overwhelming younger soldiers with credentials that might intimidate rather than inspire. He understood that effective mentorship required building relationships based on respect and trust rather than authority or superior knowledge. The weapons maintenance session began with Sergeant Martinez explaining the importance of proper care and handling of military weapons, emphasizing that soldier lives depended on equipment that functioned reliably under extreme conditions. She demonstrated basic disassembly procedures for the M4 carbine that served as the standard infantry weapon while explaining the purpose and function of each component. As the demonstration progressed, Sergeant Martinez invited participants to practice the procedures they had observed, working in pairs to disassemble and reassemble weapons under her supervision. The young soldiers approached the task with enthusiasm, though their movements were tentative and uncertain as they worked through unfamiliar procedures with expensive equipment they were afraid of damaging. William was paired with a 19-year-old recruit named Tyler Johnson, who had expressed doubts about whether the elderly volunteer would be able to keep up with the training pace or handle weapons safely. Tyler's skepticism was obvious as he watched William's trembling hands approach the weapon, though he tried to be polite and respectful in his interactions. The first few minutes of their partnership seemed to confirm Tyler's concerns as William moved slowly and carefully through the basic disassembly procedures, taking more time than the instructor had suggested and double-checking each step before proceeding. Tyler found himself growing impatient and began taking over portions of the task that he felt William was handling too slowly or uncertainly. But Sergeant Martinez had been observing the interaction and recognized something in William's movements that the young recruit had missed. The elderly man's caution wasn't hesitation or uncertainty, it was the careful, deliberate approach of someone who understood the importance of proper technique and who refused to rush through procedures that demanded precision and attention to detail. When the basic demonstration was completed, Sergeant Martinez decided to challenge the participants with a more advanced exercise that would test their understanding of the weapon systems and their ability to perform maintenance procedures under pressure. She announced that she would time volunteers as they performed complete disassembly and reassembly of their weapons, with additional points awarded for speed and accuracy. Several of the younger soldiers volunteered immediately, eager to demonstrate their newly acquired skills, and compete against their peers for bragging rights and instructor recognition. Tyler raised his hand confidently, assuming that his youth and energy would give him advantages over older participants, including his elderly partner who had struggled with the basic procedures. When Sergeant Martinez asked if any other participants wanted to volunteer, William slowly raised his hand, surprising Tyler and several other soldiers who had assumed he would decline the more challenging exercise. The instructor accepted his participation, though she privately worried about whether he would be able to complete the task successfully without embarrassing himself or creating safety concerns. William approached the demonstration table with the same careful movements he had shown throughout the training session, but something in his demeanor began to change as he examined the weapon that had been placed before him. His trembling seemed to diminish slightly as his hands made contact with the familiar metal and plastic components that had been part of his life for over 50 years. Sergeant Martinez explained the rules of the exercise, emphasizing that participants would be judged on both speed and accuracy, with points deducted for any mistakes or unsafe handling procedures. She reminded everyone that military weapons required respect and proper technique regardless of time pressure or competitive circumstances. When the exercise began, William surprised everyone by immediately closing his eyes and placing his hands on the weapon as if he were preparing to work in complete darkness. Tyler and the other soldiers watched with confusion and concern, wondering whether the elderly man had misunderstood the instructions or was experiencing some kind of medical episode that required intervention. But William's actions were deliberate and purposeful as he began to disassemble the weapon, using only his sense of touch to guide his movements. His fingers moved with increasing confidence and speed as muscle memory took control, guiding him through procedures that he had performed countless times under conditions far more challenging than a comfortable training facility. The sounds of disassembly filled the training bay as William worked through the weapon, systematically removing components in the exact sequence that military manuals prescribed, but with a fluidity and precision that exceeded anything the young soldiers had ever witnessed. Click slide released the familiar sounds, created a rhythm that spoke to decades of practice and expertise. Parts began appearing on the table in perfect order, arranged with the kind of precision that indicated not just familiarity with the procedures, but understanding of the relationships between components and the importance of organization for efficient reassembly. William's movements were no longer hesitant or uncertain. They were controlled and confident, like those of a master craftsman, demonstrating skills that had been perfected through years of dedicated practice. The training bay fell completely silent as soldiers realized they were witnessing something extraordinary. This wasn't just an elderly volunteer struggling through unfamiliar procedures. This was a demonstration of expertise that exceeded their own knowledge and capabilities despite their recent training and youthful enthusiasm. When William completed the disassembly, he paused for a moment before beginning the reassembly process, still working with his eyes closed and relying entirely on tactile feedback to guide his movements. His hands moved even faster during reassembly as components came together with the smooth precision of a well-practiced routine that required no conscious thought or deliberate effort. The weapon was completely reassembled in less time than any of the young soldiers had taken to perform the same task, with their eyes open and detailed instructions available for reference. William opened his eyes and checked his work briefly before stepping back from the table and nodding to Sergeant Martinez to indicate that he had completed the exercise. Sergeant Martinez examined the weapon carefully, checking to ensure that all components had been properly installed and that no steps had been missed or performed incorrectly. Her inspection revealed that William's work was not only complete, but perfect, with every component properly positioned and secured according to military specifications and safety requirements. The silence that had filled the training bay during William's demonstration gave way to spontaneous applause as soldiers recognized that they had witnessed something remarkable. Tyler looked embarrassed and ashamed, remembering his earlier skepticism and impatience, while other recruits began asking questions about William's background and experience with weapons systems. Sergeant Martinez asked William to explain his technique and share his perspective on weapons maintenance, with the group understanding that they had been privileged to witness a master class in skills that couldn't be learned from manuals or classroom instruction alone. William responded with characteristic modesty, explaining that his abilities came from years of practice under conditions that had demanded perfection. William described his military service and subsequent civilian career working with weapons systems, emphasizing that the skills he had demonstrated were the result of necessity rather than natural talent. He explained that in combat zones weapons failures could be fatal and that soldiers who depended on their equipment had to develop expertise that went beyond basic training or routine maintenance procedures. The elderly veteran shared stories about field repairs performed under enemy fire, improvised solutions to equipment problems that weren't covered in technical manuals, and the importance of understanding weapon systems well enough to diagnose and fix problems using minimal tools and materials. His accounts provided context that helped the young soldiers understand the life-and-death importance of the skills they were learning. William also emphasized that modern weapons systems were actually more reliable and easier to maintain than the equipment he had used during his own military service, crediting advances in engineering and manufacturing with creating weapons that required less specialized knowledge and fewer field repairs than previous generations of military equipment. But he stressed that reliability didn't eliminate the need for proper maintenance, and that soldiers who understood their weapons thoroughly would always have advantages over those who treated them as black boxes that either worked or didn't. He encouraged the recruits to develop the kind of intimate familiarity with their equipment that would allow them to diagnose problems quickly and perform repairs confidently under any conditions. The training session continued with William serving as an informal instructor, sharing techniques and insights that weren't available in standard training materials. His presence transformed the atmosphere from a routine training exercise into an opportunity for genuine learning and skill development that would benefit the young soldiers throughout their military careers. Tyler approached William privately to apologize for his earlier skepticism and to ask for additional guidance on weapons maintenance techniques. The elderly veteran accepted the apology graciously while offering to work with Tyler and other interested soldiers on advanced procedures that could improve their proficiency and confidence with military weapons systems. The impact of Williams' demonstration extended far beyond the immediate training session as word spread throughout the base about the elderly volunteer whose expertise with weapons systems exceeded that of experienced military instructors. His story became an example of the value that older veterans could bring to military training and the importance of recognizing expertise regardless of age or current position. Military leadership began seeking opportunities to better utilize Williams' knowledge and experience, while other veterans in the mentorship program were encouraged to share their own specialized skills and expertise with active duty personnel who could benefit from their knowledge and perspective. William Harper continued participating in the mentorship program with new respect and recognition from military personnel who had learned to appreciate the depth of knowledge and experience that older veterans could contribute to military training and readiness. His demonstration had shown that expertise doesn't diminish with age and that skills developed through years of practice and necessity remain valuable regardless of changes in technology or military doctrine. The young soldiers who had witnessed Williams' demonstration learned important lessons about making assumptions based on appearances and about recognizing that knowledge and expertise can come from unexpected sources. They discovered that the trembling hands of an elderly man might possess skills that exceeded their own capabilities, and that respect should be based on knowledge and character rather than age or current position. Sometimes the most extraordinary demonstrations of skill and expertise come from the most unlikely sources, reminding us that mastery is developed through years of practice and dedication rather than youth or contemporary training. William Harper had spent decades perfecting his understanding of weapons systems, but had never sought recognition or attention for his expertise, preferring to contribute quietly to the development of younger soldiers. The lesson learned from William's story was about the value of experience and the importance of creating opportunities for knowledge transfer between generations of military personnel. His blindfolded demonstration had revealed not just individual expertise, but the broader potential for veterans to contribute to military readiness through mentorship and skill sharing. In the end, William Harper didn't need recognition or validation from younger soldiers because he had always known the value of his skills and knowledge. But the recognition meant something to the military community that learned to appreciate the resources available through veteran mentorship and to the young soldiers who gained new respect for the wisdom and expertise that surrounded them in unexpected places. This story was brought to you by Silent Salute. Before we leave you today, here's our question. Have you ever known someone who never asked for recognition, but deserved more than anyone else? Tell us in the comments what they meant to you and how you remember them. And if you think stories like this need to be heard, hit that subscribe button to support the channel. We'll see you in the next one.